has resigned, citing health reasons. This as the country faces a surge in mass kidnappings that have put a spotlight on the government's efforts to tackle rising violence. The departure of Abubakar, who had not been seen in public in recent weeks, was announced yesterday evening, only days after President Bola Tinubu declared a security emergency in response to mass kidnappings by armed gangs and attacks by Islamist militants in northern Nigeria. The United Nations said in a report on the 25th of November that at least 402 people have been abducted since mid-November in Nigeria, while analysts warn that economic hardship and weak governance are fueling insecurity. The South African Weather Service has issued a Level 4 and Level 2 warning across the country today. The forecast includes severe thunderstorm and fire danger alerts, which will result in potential risks such as flooding, hail, strong winds and dangerous fire conditions. In the KwaZulu-Natal province, a Level 5 warning has been forecast for the areas in the northern part of the province, while Level 4 has been issued for areas along the coastline, including eThekwini and those in the Midlands. Senzelo Mzila is the spokesperson for the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs.
Residents are urged to exercise utmost caution. Disaster management teams will be closely monitoring these areas.
And finally, more than 100,000 people have attended a mass held by Pope Leo on the seafront in Beirut on the last day of his visit in Lebanon. The Pope said the beauty of Lebanon had been darkened by poverty, violence, conflict and economic crisis. He called on the country to raise itself up and be a sign of peace for the region.
The Middle East needs new approaches in order to reject the mindset of revenge and violence, to overcome political, social, and religious divisions, and to open new chapters in the name of reconciliation and peace.
Recapping the top story this hour, the diplomatic spat between South Africa and the US continues to intensify. The United States has not invited Pretoria to the first G20 Sherpas meeting to be held in the US. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Jolani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, the CAF Africa Cup of Nations is expected to start on the 21st of December, and the referees are waiting for rewards. Netball South Africa President Mamedi Diale explains the choice of venue to face England in 2026. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
All right, you're listening to Africa in Business. I'm Innocent Semosa, and of course, in for Tami Ngobeni. We're also broadcasting live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're on DSTV Audio Bouquet, channel 802, in Open View on channel 628, and you can also stream us on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Google and Apple Play Store. Join the conversation by finding us on X. We're at Channel Africa #1, on Facebook at Channel Africa, and on Instagram at Channel Africa 1. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Channel Africa 1. Now, coming up on the show this hour, we are talking to the African Energy Chamber, who has issued a statement condemning the British government's decision to withdraw its $1.115 billion support for the Total Energies-led Mozambique liquefied natural gas projects, saying that the Western climate agenda undermines Africa's urgent need for energy security and economic growth. But we also continue with the wrap of the G20 Leader Summit that took place here in South Africa with the Abdulaziz Al-Saif, the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors at the Vision of Leadership Association. And we also have our regular feature with Standard Bank.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et les bons dieux pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'avait inspiré pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Tamin Gubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Right, let's look at this story now. The British government has announced that it will draw its $1.15 billion US support for the Total Energies-led Mozambique liquefied natural gas project, with the Netherlands following suit, bringing the total withdrawal to $2.2 billion US. Now, the funding had been promised in 2020 through UK Export Finance, just before the UK committed to ending direct government backing for overseas fossil fuel projects. Now, the African Energy Chamber has since condemned the UK's withdrawal of the $1.15 billion US from Mozambique's LNG, citing that the Western climate agendas undermining Africa's urgent need for energy security and economic growth. For more on this, we're now joined on the line by Executive Chairman of African Energy Chamber, NJ Ayuk. NJ, a very good afternoon to you and welcome to Channel Africa.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
I don't know whether or not I should start by saying drill, baby, drill, but we'll get to that. What are the, you have condemned this, and what are your main concerns regarding the UK's decision to withdraw this $1.15 billion US from Mozambique's LNG project?
I think this was it's a really bad decision. Economically, financially, and also bad for global energy security, bad for Mozambique need to develop its natural gas to power Mozambique and also supply gas to the region. But you know what? It is a speed bump. It's not a stop. Mozambique is going to move with this project. I think it's for most Africans and that are concerned about Mozambique and want to see this nation grow and thrive. It is very, very alarming that we just came out of a G20 in South Africa, where everybody, all the global leaders showed up to South Africa, and it was basically an African G20 with a strong commitment to African industrialization, African prosperity, African development. And 1 week right after that, what's the first thing the UK does and the Netherlands? They pull back financing out of this country, which could go from zero to the third largest producer of natural gas in the world. It sends the wrong message, and that comes with a big question: that did those G20 commitments for African prosperity really mean anything? How are you going to make a commitment and then 1 week later you start by sending signals of dismantling the most core part of any development, gas development, financing for industrialization? But I think, Total Energies is a great company. They have been resilient on this, working together with President Chapo and the Mozambicans. They're going to find a way, and they're already having solutions to make this work.
Speaking about finding a way and making it work, NJ, how significant was the UK Export Finance support to the project's overall financing structure?
It was 10% of the financing for this project. So 10% is a huge it's a huge number. But you know what? Right now you're at a position where you have to look at equity among the shareholders of the project and see how you spread that out and see how they can basically raise that funding to accomplish this. So it's not even a great financial decision from the UK, because that natural gas is so good for the world and for Mozambique. Don't forget, they're basing this out of climate change and low carbon and all of that. Mozambique's natural gas is going to be one of the most low carbon natural gas that's going to be produced in the world. It's going to be so carbon friendly than anything you've ever seen. So I think the project, because of that and the stats around it, of course the country has gone through some difficult times when it comes to security in Cap Delgado, but guess what? They worked it together. They put troops on the ground. They got the communities back. The communities are 100% with these projects. They're trying to get it done. We should be focusing on that. How about we let Mozambicans make their choices and not necessarily have people with external agendas on the radical climate agendas come to destroy this project and, in a sense, actually affect the country and its growth.
And NJ, I mean, the British business minister in part cited increased risks, and UK taxpayers' interest as a reason or some of the reasons for withdrawing the support. In your view, what's the Africa Energy Chamber's take on the provided reason? Does it hold water in your view?
I love this guy. He's an amazing guy, but he's dead wrong. And I'll tell you why. They based a human rights report which was written by people that never set foot in Mozambique. You are going to make a decision, a $1 billion investment, citing human rights concern on a report written by somebody that never set foot in the country. That is something that is clear circumspect. And you know what's even funny? That same risk assessment and looking at risk to UK taxpayers and risk on the project, that same assessment was done by another export finance, that is the US Exim Bank. They did the same kind of due diligence. They did the same kind of compliance and all risk analysis. And guess what they did? They provided $4.5 billion in financing. Sometimes I'd rather take Trump, who doesn't come to the G20 and tell me he loves me, and he finances a project, than the ones who come, hold your hands and share and tell you and hug you and sing all that kumbaya, then go back and cancel financing for you. That is actually very, very troubling. The Americans looked at the project, did a due diligence, did a risk analysis, and they gave 4.5. The British looked at the same thing and did a risk analysis and got somebody who's never been to Mozambique, and they say, oh, we're pulling back. It is bigger than that. It is an issue of a radical climate agenda that they're pursuing, and also the fear of an African nation growing to be stronger and better and producing the natural resources it needs to drive its own environment. It scares some people.
Yeah, and indeed. So do you perhaps think that maybe the Mozambican government should look elsewhere, look for funding at the other financial institutions like your World Bank, and what immediate financial or operational disruptions could this create for Total Energies and project partners?
Well, Mozambican government is going to have to look at that, but let me tell you this. The World Bank is not going to fund natural gas projects. It should be. It's reconsidering that stand on it. And we've been advocating that the World Bank should get right into these projects and provide funding. The World Bank is a development institution. It's not an institution that is supposed to continue providing access to poverty. It should be giving access to development and dealing with African energy poverty issues. In Uganda, when Total Energies ran into this same problem, who stepped up? African Finance Corporation, Afri-Exim Bank, they stepped up and they closed the gap. I would urge Mozambicans to engage African financial institutions or maybe Asian financial institutions, Middle East financial institutions, and really drive that, because we don't want to go on this societal path that Western countries are taking themselves to with their radical views around climate change that goes into stopping global development and human flourishing. Of course, Total Energies is a world-class institution. You got to see what they do. They have technologies that's going to produce low carbon LNG. They have been working hard on the ground to respect communities. They have been providing a lot of corporate social responsibility and working in empowering a lot of young people and women in that country. Their balance sheet is huge. I'm very confident that Total Energies, they've already put out 10% equity out there to see, and they're going to raise the funding needed to get this project. Like what I said, it's a speed bump, it's not a roadblock, and it's definitely not a showstopper. We're going to do it, but this is a warning for Africans. We have to build our own financial institutions to step up in times like this and stop the reliance on Western financial institutions that will somehow fail you in the middle. Right when you're about to take off, they pull the rock on you. Dangote Refinery proves that in Nigeria. See what he's done. We need to be driving that, and that's why we support the African Energy Bank, so that we can rally African private capital and even use African pension funds on things like this to really be able to power and industrialize our continent, rather than wait for others to dictate to us their morals. We're sitting in writing reports from places where they've never been to.
Indeed, NJ, I think you're spot on. The over-reliance has been a big conversation in the continent. But as if we hit the home stretch of this conversation, in your view, how can the African Energy Bank step in as we see the Western countries pulling, their funding?
In Nigeria today, last week, the African Energy Bank basically gave us signal that they are ready for the launch. We're going to have an African Energy Bank. There's no question about it. Capital has been raised. Seed funding is there. Contributions from nations have been there. It's not yet complete, but it's coming together. So African Energy Bank is not going to be the only solution, but it's going to also be that pathway, that bridge that comes in at this critical time. We've realized that sometimes we're going to have to look inward. We're going to have to look at our partners in Asia and the Middle East, working together with African private capital. I can tell you, first quarter 2026, you're going to hear news of a big launch for a very transformative project, the African Energy Bank, and it's going to send a clear message that it's time for us to take our development in our own hands, because we put in pension funds in a lot of these Western financial institutions that wouldn't even finance your own growth. They wouldn't finance gas in Africa, but they would finance gas in Europe. Yeah. You know that at the same time, the British are saying this, they say natural gas is growing in Europe, but it's not growing in Africa, so they can't finance it. That hypocritical nature of it needs to stop. And this is time where Africa needs to come together and stand with Mozambique to drive this project up.
Right. Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber, NJ Ayuk. Thank you so much for indeed making the time.
Thank you. It's an honor.
That conversation brings us to exactly 16:21 Central African Time.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Tamin Gubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Indeed, connecting Africa to the world. Let's look at this story now. Malawi has embraced the use of drones along its borders with Mozambique, Zambia and Tanzania to combat smuggling, which has negatively affected national revenue collection. This initiative follows a report from the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, to the government indicating that efforts to maximize revenue collection being hampered by widespread smuggling. The initiative doubled drone border surveillance as part of the Southern Africa Trade Connectivity Project founded by the World Bank Group. George Mango reports from Blantyre, Malawi's commercial capital.
The Malawi government, through the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, is introducing this key monitoring system, hoping to apprehend traders who import goods through uncharted routes. Authorities have noted that for years, Lilongwe has lost millions through tax evasion, especially smuggling. Apart from traders undervaluing and underdeclaring goods when clearing them at the borders, the major revenue loss has come from those who bring goods into the country using unauthorized routes. It is no wonder that Malawian authorities have been under intense pressure to find ways to deal with the smugglers of taxable goods along the borders with Zambia, Mozambique and Tanzania. Budding business entrepreneur Brian Kampanje was upbeat that government will be able to collect the much-needed revenue, which ended up in the hands of non-patriotic Malawians.
Every small effort to curb or control smuggling of goods into Malawi, illegal exports, is a welcome development. This is an effective deterrent measure, force compliance, and increase the tax revenue for both import and export duty and taxes. The program should, however, be monitored and evaluated to ensure that whatever is spent is not more than what is collected. Because if we spend more to enforce compliance through these small smugglers, then perhaps it is not ideal to roll it out on a larger scale. Probably this could be because the real smuggling happens at the official borders.
During the last financial year, the tax collecting body failed to reach its target, which forced the government to borrow from commercial banks at unpalatable interest rates. Now the government has introduced the drone border surveillance system to track down smugglers and save millions that can be used to provide basic amenities. Drone operating expert Kampata Nyirongo was quick to call for ethical standards while hailing the move.
We should expect that data and information that is being gathered in the borders should be of high quality. It also helps to reduce risk to personnel. Deploying human beings into, for example, dangerous border areas might pose a risk to the health and safety of the deployed officials. But with the drones, that risk is therefore taken out. One thing, though, that we need to be mindful of is that we should make sure that we don't abuse the system. Because I always argue and say that any system is as good as the people who are using it.
As of this week, the government has informed Malawians that since the launch of this initiative funded by the World Bank Group, 421 arrests have been made and goods worth millions of Malawi kwacha have been intercepted through the use of the drone border surveillance system. Using drones has since excited a Blantyre-based city resident, James Perry, who says authorities will now be able to collect more revenue and build schools or health facilities.
The use of drones in detecting smuggling is a good development because it will greatly assist in increasing revenue for our country. I expect that through this initiative, we will have significant increase in the revenue that MRA collects for our national coffers. However, apart from this being an initiative that can effectively curb corruption, because physical borders and custom checkpoints are susceptible to corruption because of the involvement of human beings. So the use of drones to detect smuggled goods is welcome, but we should make sure that the smuggled goods detected by the drones are accurately and transparently reported.
Malawian authorities began equipping drone operators from the Malawi Revenue Authority with the necessary knowledge and skills. The pilot phase of the drones started before the end of 2022 with a phase-based concept which included stakeholder engagements with local chiefs, partnerships, and public meetings. George Muhango, Channel Africa News, Blantyre.
Now, South Africa's economy has recorded modest growth of 0.5% in the third quarter when compared with the second quarter, which grew by 0.9%, supported by improvements in manufacturing, household spending, and fixed investment, but weighed down once again by electricity production and rising imports. The economy, which has recorded subdued growth in 2025, according to the data released by Stats SA on Tuesday. Dimakazo Leshuru has more.
South Africa's economy expanded by 0.5% in the third quarter, down from a 0.9% growth in the second quarter. According to Statistics South Africa, 9 of the 10 sectors tracked recorded higher output, with mining and agriculture performing strongly. But the electricity, gas and water sector dragged the numbers, shrinking by 2.5% due to declining electricity production. Joe DeBeer is the Deputy Director General responsible for economic statistics at Statistics South Africa.
Electricity dropped by the 2.5%, as I've mentioned before, due to a drop in the production of electricity. And then lastly, construction posted a slight positive, 0.1%, and that's for non-residential building and construction works. Lastly, for the tertiary sector, all 5 of those sub-sectors, sub-industries that we identified posted positive results in the third quarter. Trade up by 1%, transport 0.1%, services 0.3%, government 0.7%, and personal services 0.3%.
On the expenditure side of the economy, household spending grew by 0.5%, helped by improving consumer conditions and stable interest rates. Durable goods, especially vehicles, showed strong demand, which matched an uptick in motor vehicle manufacturing. Gross fixed capital formation, a key indicator of long-term investment, rose by 1.6%, supported by purchases of transport equipment as well as investment by airlines and the shipping industry. Inventories also increased sharply, rising by $1.5 billion, pointing to stockpiling in sectors such as trade and manufacturing. Dr. Elna Mulman, Group Head of Macroeconomic Research at Standard Bank in South Africa, elaborates.
Fixed investment encouragingly recovered in the third quarter, though this was driven almost entirely by the public sector. Private sector fixed investment increased by a negligible 0.1% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. At least there is then still evidence of ongoing traction with government's growth-supportive fixed investment drive.
Government spending increased by 0.3%, boosted by job creation in the public sector and the expanded public works program. But imports grew faster than exports, rising by 2.2% compared to 0.7%, dampening overall GDP performance.
The picture is not as similar as what we saw on the supply side. Last quarter, we had 2 expansions and 3 contractions on the expenditure side. This time around, all 5 of the variables that we measure expanded. But as we know, if imports expand, it actually contracts from GDP. That's why in the bottom right corner of the slide, you'll see the negative 0.6 contribution of the expenditure side. But the growth mostly came from household consumption, expanded by the 0.7, which contributed to 0.5, and we show strong growth from gross fixed capital formation.
Mulman says even though the numbers show progress, the country's growth remains far too low.
The crux is that the economy is performing in line with our expectations in a very difficult year, from where we still expect to see an improvement in growth over the medium term.
For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro.
All right, good news coming from Stats SA. Let's look at market indicators with Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Innocent. Good afternoon. And our final look at the indicators for this afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 9 cents in South Africa, and Botswana is trading at 13 Pula 88. Namibia, 17 Namibian dollars 94. And the Zambian kwacha is trading at 22 kwacha 88. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 30. In Ethiopia, 154 birr 23. Uganda 3,592 shilling, and in Tanzania it's at 2,457 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,443 naira this afternoon. In Egypt it's trading at 47 Egyptian pound 47. Tunisia at 2 dinar 92, while Algeria is trading at 129 dinar 36. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 14 this afternoon. In Angola, it's trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,185 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,206 per ounce, platinum at $1,634 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil this afternoon is $62.73 a barrel. And that's the indicators. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Tami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
All right, thank you, Bontle. Let's now look at the world of sport with Fikile Lingwati. Fikile, very good afternoon to you.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good afternoon, Innocent. We begin in our sports business or business of sport with the CAF referees, where the Africa Cup of Nations is expected to start on the 21st of December until the 19th of January 2026 in Morocco. Africa's football's governing body, CAF, has appointed officials from across the continent and promised to compensate them accordingly. CAF does not have a unified published salary structure for its referees, but it has historically paid $1,200 per match for CAF level officials, with payments sometimes subject to delays. In South Africa's Premier Soccer League, a top-tier referee earns $356 per match, plus $286 in a monthly stipend, with travel costs covered and bonuses available for cup competitions. Other notable referee earnings are as follows. A referee who officiated in the 2022 World Cup earned a base pay of around $70,000 plus match fees and other allowances. FIFA World Cup match fees are $3,000 for the group stage and $10,000 for playoffs and finals. A referee can earn up to $300,000 by officiating in all stages, including the final, as reported by Refereeing World. Wignell Chivayo is advocating for Highlanders to appoint Benjani Mwaruwaru as the club's new head coach in Zimbabwe's Football Association. Boso are currently searching for a replacement after parting ways with Peter de Jong, whose 4-month tenure failed to impress as the Bulawayo Giants battled for survival until the final match day. Chivayo clarified that any arrangement with Mwaruwaru would fall outside the $1 million sponsorship package he pledged to the club. He says he committed that outside his $1 million donation and would personally secure and safeguard his contractual benefits over and above the sponsorship package, which remains available to help Boso sign quality players for the 2026 Premier League. Netball South Africa NSA President Mame Diale has explained the reasons behind selecting Ellis Park Indoor Arena as the venue for next month's highly anticipated Test series against England. The series is scheduled for the 29th of January to the 1st of February and will see the England Roses arriving in the country 2 weeks before the first centre pass. Diale says Ellis Park was chosen primarily for logistical and financial reasons, noting that hosting the series in cities like Cape Town or Durban would be far more expensive. She emphasized that NSA simply does not have the budget to stage the event anywhere else?
I think it's easy for logistical purposes, especially for the incoming countries as well, because they have to land in Johannesburg and then go to Cape Town or Durban. But it's also very, financially viable for us to host in Johannesburg than in Cape Town. The venue in Cape Town is very expensive, the same in Durban. So Johannesburg is very reasonable financially.
And in basketball news, the Liberia Basketball Association LBA has adopted a new constitution and approved a $265,000 budget for the upcoming season, marking the first major governance overhaul since Abraham Samukai assumed the association's presidency in 2023. The Policy Congress in Painesville introduced sweeping reforms intended to modernize the administration of Liberian football. Delegates voted to limit the LBA presidency to 2 4-year terms, a measure supporters say will strengthen accountability and curb prolonged tenures. Now, golf news. Laurie Kenter, the first former LIV Golf member to earn a spot on the PGA Tour, has chosen to rejoin LIV in 2026 rather than play on the PGA Tour. Last month, Kenter earned a 2026 PGA Tour card after finishing 7th in the DP World Tour season's ending standings. Kenter announced his signing with LIV and the league's Majestic Golf Club, taking the place of Henrik Stenson, who was relegated and is now rejoining the DP World Tour. The Stenson was infamously stripped of the 2023 European Tour. Now, the Ryder Cup team captaincy was, after joining LIV in 2022, received a signing bonus from LIV, reportedly worth between $40 million and $50 million. All 4 members of the Majestics are now English, co-captained by Ian Poulter and Lee Westwood, with Sam Horsfield rounding out the roster. Kenter made $441 million in individual prize money with LIV from 2022 to 2024. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figede Nwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
A very big thank you to the sports desk. You're still listening to Africa in Business on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. My name is Innocent Semosa, in for Tami Ngobeni. Join the conversation by finding us on X at Channel Africa #1, on Facebook at Channel Africa, on Instagram at Channel Africa 1. You can also subscribe on our YouTube at Channel Africa 1. You can also send your comments and voice notes to +27 63 406 9123. That number is +27 63 406 126. In your comments, of course, you can tell us which country you are in. We love hearing from you. If you have missed any of our interviews, you can find them on www.channelafrica.co.za. Click on programming, look for Africa in Business, and you can find a podcast of whatever you have missed.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwena@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Tami Ngobeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
All right, as global leaders push for sweeping World Trade Organization WTO reform, senior international trade consultant Collins Negwe warns that the debate is overlooking a crucial force, the diaspora. He says multilateralism cannot be rebuilt with outdated systems, while the technical expertise and economic influence of diaspora professionals remain sidelined. Here's the conversation I had with senior international trade consultant Collins Negwe. The WTO's reform agenda often focuses on legal and institutional issues. Meanwhile, senior international trade consultant Collins Negwe argues that the real gap is human capital. But how can African countries practically mobilize their diaspora trade experts to fill this capacity deficit, especially in areas like dispute settlement and complex trade negotiations?
The central thesis of my book on economic diplomacy of the diaspora is pretty simple. Africa is not short of talent. It is short of systems that recognize and deploy that talent. As the World Trade Organization embarks on its most ambitious reform in 30 years, African countries cannot afford to remain spectators. Our diaspora holds some of the finest trade lawyers, negotiators, and economists anywhere in the world. If we integrate them strategically, we bridge our capacity gap instantly and reposition Africa as a rules shaper and not rules takers.
Negwe highlights that global trade governance remains state-centric while the world has become network-driven. He also recommended some structural changes for the WTO to formally integrate diaspora professionals into the reform processes rather than treating them as a peripheral actors.
Innocent, the World Trade Organization still thinks in 20th century's silos. Member states on one side, observers on the other, while global trade now moves through networks and knowledge ecosystems. That's the reality of today. To integrate diaspora expertise, 3 structural shifts are critically essential. 1, create a WTO knowledge affiliate system, allowing accredited diaspora experts to directly support committees, especially on new issues like digital trade and supply chain security. 2, mobilize stakeholder advisory panels where diaspora professional bodies can feed into reform debates, not as lobbyists, but as technical partners.
With the G20 now aligning behind the need for deep WTO reform, the question is, what risks do African nations face if they fail to leverage the strategic economic diplomacy potential of their diaspora?
Right. The G20's alignment behind deep WTO reform is a double-edged sword. It creates opportunity, but also the risk that Africa becomes a rule taker again if it shows up unprepared. Without diaspora expertise, African countries risk being absent from the drafting rooms, losing out on digital trade rules, supply chain incentives, and new subsidy disciplines that will define 21st century commerce. A successful model is one where countries deploy diaspora negotiators as strategic assets, from preparing negotiating text to sitting in technical working groups to supporting litigation at the WTO's restored dispute settlement body.
And as calls for WTO reform grow louder, Negwe's message is clear. Africa's competitive edge may depend on how boldly it activates its diaspora in reshaping the future of global trade. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Semosa in Johannesburg. All right, let's look at this story now. As the United States prepares for the year ahead of its G20 presidency, a number of countries are taking stock of some of the deals they've managed to secure at the South Africa's G20 Leaders Summit. Now, one of such country is Saudi Arabia, which was led by Prince Fahd bin Mansour bin Nasser bin Abdulaziz, chair of the G20 Startup 20 Engagement Group. The Saudi delegation says it was able to promote its national programs in innovation and entrepreneurship and to sign agreements of MOUs during the G20 summit now, and that their participation also in Africa's first G20 summit signaled a renewed global rush of Africa. For more on this, we're now joined on the line by Abdulaziz Al Saif, the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Vision of Leadership Association. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to Channel Africa. Perhaps let me begin by asking you this question. Did Saudi Arabia achieve the goals it set going into this G20 summit?
Well, first of all, good evening, and thank you for having me. Definitely. I mean, first of all, I would like to thank, the host of South Africa for generously hosting us this year. They've done a tremendous job with everything that they've done so far. And yes, I think in many ways, a lot of things were accomplished this year. One thing for sure is that we worked through different task forces with our engagement group to draft a lot of these different policies depending on the task force. And at the end of that summit, of course, all of that was shared with, leaders. Specifically tying to the engagement group, which was Startup 20, and a lot of the topics that tie to both startups, small and medium enterprises, and entrepreneurs. So I think that has been accomplished. But on the other aspect, it's just being able to be present with all of the G20 nations, and especially the South African counterparts, whether it's the ecosystem. I think a lot of partnerships have been established between South Africa and Saudi Arabia. We've signed more than 25 MOUs all across different industries. So yeah, I do think it has been really successful and wonderful.
Yeah, 25 MOUs. I guess it's a step in the right direction. But I'm keen to know in what way did the outcomes of the summit support or accelerate Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 priorities?
Definitely. So I think one of the key things in terms of Vision 2030 is really diversifying the economy, learning from different new industries, whether it's abroad through G20 nations, and basically collaborating with other nations. I think throughout the summit itself, a lot of these different partnerships have helped or enabled entrepreneurs from Saudi to start working globally. And this is not just this year, but all throughout the years that we've participated in this engagement group. And I think that's really wonderful. And that's one part, of course. The other aspect is really just learning from other nations and just basically being able to showcase a lot of the programs that the kingdom has developed as part of the Vision 2030. Now, for our space, it's more of like, for startups, what have we done in terms of investment, in terms of programs for accelerators, incubators, and ways for entrepreneurs to come into the kingdom through the entrepreneurship visa or the premium residency to be able to contribute into also our economy, but grow themselves.
You also talk about collaboration. In your view, how did Saudi Arabia's program deepen bilateral or multilateral ties with African nations during this summit?
Definitely. So I think the African Union was part of the summit itself. A lot of countries were also participating at the summit. And so with our delegations, there's really a full ecosystem of different stakeholders, whether it's government authorities, enablers, accelerators, investors, and startups, and being able to really come to South Africa and meet, other delegates from different countries was really helpful. And I think it's just a platform for us to be able to connect with those others. And we did hear a lot of great stories from our delegates in connecting with both people from South Africa or other nations within Africa. But I think it's definitely useful to have more of these platforms for us to come and allow for our delegations to really engage with other nations, regardless of where they come from, of course.
Yeah, Abdulaziz, just before I let you go, how does Saudi Arabia plans to build on the momentum from the South Africa's G20 presidency in the upcoming G20 cycle?
So I think as of the moment right now, the social engagement group itself, we do connect heavily with all of the counterparts from all of the nations. And we work year on year to make sure that basically a lot of this collaboration continues to work. As of now, we're still waiting to see what next year looks like in terms of agenda. So until that moment happens, we do still connect with all of the nations within G20 to make sure that these collaborations continue, whether it's on a similar platform or throughout the years that are coming up.
Abdulaziz Al Saif, the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Vision of Leadership Association. Thank you for indeed making the time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. Up next is Vudi Africa with Joel. Joel, you're laughing. All right. So what can we expect on
Vue d'Afrique.
Vue d'Afrique.
Bonjour Benjamin, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Alors sur Vue d'Afrique tout à l'heure, il sera question du Bénin et du parti justement au Bénin, le parti d'opposition, les démocrates le parti a été officiellement réintégré dans la course électorale pour les législatives. Il nous fera un petit tour au Nigeria où un nouveau ministre a été nommé au lendemain de la démission de Alhaji Mohamed Badourou pour raison de santé. Nous parlerons également des réactions au Cameroun après la mort en prison de l'opposant Anissé Kané. Et en sport avec Jolino Sungu dans la deuxième partie du magazine, il sera notamment question du foot et particulièrement du projet FIFA pour le renforcement du pouvoir de la VAR. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Benjamin.
All right, that's Vudi Afrique with Joel coming up next.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Tamengobeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
All right. The Standard Bank Group, Africa's largest financial institution by assets, has announced the launch of its representative office in Egypt. The group's representative office will strengthen trade and investment flows between Egypt, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East, recognizing Egypt's role as a vital gateway in Africa's north-south trade corridor. For more on this, we're now joined on the line by Dr. Rasim Zouk, Chief Executive MENA and Chief Representative Officer, Egypt Office. A very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much, Innocent. Great to be with you.
Indeed. What has led to the decision to open a representative office in Egypt, and what are the advantages here that Egypt offers?
Thank you very much. Great to be with you on the show. So basically, a bit of background. So Standard Bank is Africa's largest bank. It's been in existence for 163 years. Initially set up in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, which is obviously until now our hub, but then developed into other countries in the African continent. Before opening Egypt, we were present in 20 economies on the African continent, but they were all in the sub-Saharan space. So we were very much known as a very large and the largest bank on the continent, but we had never ventured into North Africa. So it's very significant. We took a decision to actually be present in Egypt, recognizing the fact that Egypt is constantly one of the top 3 economies on the continent. Egypt represents incredible, prospects. It has a very vibrant economy, diversified, complex, exciting, and very importantly, it is at the crossroads of the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the rest of the world. So we're looking to play that triangle, and the decision was taken to actually start our presence in Egypt by a representative office, which is the beginning of our journey into that country, but in no way the end of it. We are very, very excited with our presence there, and we want to contribute to what we can do in Egypt that we've already done in other countries where the bank is present on the continent.
Yeah. And speaking about collaboration and contribution, Dr. Zouk, what is Standard Bank Group's current presence in the MENA region, and where will Standard Bank's focuses its efforts in Egypt?
Sure. So, Innocent, you may know, but we are split as a group regionally between three big regions. So we have obviously South Africa. We have what we call Africa regions, which is the now 20 countries with Egypt. So Egypt has become country number 21 for us on the continent. So these 20 countries, including the largest economies, including Nigeria, including Angola, including Ghana, including the whole East Africa part, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and then that Africa region then now will include also Egypt, and will include its first country in North Africa, very significant. And outside the African continent, we have four big hubs, big financial hubs, through which the bank conducts its cross-border business. So outside of Africa, we don't run domestic businesses. We only run cross-border businesses, and I run obviously one of the hubs, which is the Middle East and North Africa. Initially out of DIFC, out of Dubai. We've been in Dubai since 1997. We've been in DIFC since its inception around 20 years ago. That's a very important hub for us, for MENA. And Egypt is very relevant to that regard because it will also be part of the MENA region. So giving a lot of backup to what we're saying in the GCC countries. And as you know, the GCC countries are and will remain very critical to what's happening economically in Egypt. We take a lot of comfort from that, the same way we take comfort from the IMF support. The other big hubs is obviously Beijing. You may know that our largest single shareholder is ICBC of China. So we have quite a big structure run by one of my colleagues in China through our Beijing office. Then we have our largest international presence out of the London office. And then we have also an office in New York. So these four offices, the main aim of those offices is to connect corporates, big high street brands that have operations or want to do business in Africa, and then we become their bankers, and we have the value suite of the full suite of banking services that we can offer on the continent. We also can finance their operation, we finance acquisitions, we can finance projects that they are embarked on in any of these countries where we're present on the African continent.
Right.
But we also have other kind of counterparts such as sovereign wealth funds that we look to serve as well on the continent, and financial investors, private equity players, so on and so forth.
All right. That's Dr. Razim Zok, Chief Executive MENA and Chief Representative Officer, Egypt Office. Thank you so much for indeed making the time, sir.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, there you have it. That brings us to exactly 16:59 Central African Time. Well, there you have it. That's my lot on this episode of Africa in Business. My name is Innocent Semosa, and I was in for Tami Ngobeni. From myself, Innocent Semosa, on behalf of the team behind the scenes, it's goodbye and God bless.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Tami Ngobeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h, temps universel. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bonjour à tous et excellentes conditions à l'écoute de Canal Afrique, la perspective africaine.